ready to go. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I declare this meeting of the Regional Development Assessment Panel on Tuesday, the 11th of March, open at 9:31. I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and are joined by people from other lands around the state. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, lands, water and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the RDAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the RDAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of those regulations. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll introduce the panel. Myself, I am the presiding member today. My name is Karen Hyde. To my left, I have Eugene Coltaz, Deputy Presiding Member. Further to my left, John Symes, Specialist Member. And we have Councillor David Binks, our local government DAP member from the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River, in the room. And joining us online, Councillor Greg Boland, local government DAP member from the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River. We've also got DAP Secretariat in the room today. Item 2, apologies, we have none. Item 3, members on leave of absence, we have none. Noting of minutes at item 4, previous minutes are available on the DAP website. We have only part B of this agenda today for the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River. We're also joined for this part of the meeting by Lucy Gowes and Matt Cuthbert from the Shire. And we have one presentation later on from Mark Halsall for the applicant. First of all, please can I take declarations of due consideration? Could panel members confirm they've duly considered all the documentation contained within part B of the agenda and the related information with the show of hands? Thank you. Thank you very much. Everybody has given due consideration to the materials. Disclosures of interest. Could I please just check firstly with the Shire elected members, was this Form 2 considered at council?
No, this wasn't. Irrespective of that, I have already provided Secretariat with a impartiality interest.
Okay, thank you. And that impartiality interest is related to?
The consideration of Form 1.
Ah, okay. But today it's just the Form 2. Yes, all right, thank you. We never got one for that. Okay, no, that's all good. So in that regard, then there are no disclosures of interest from the elected members. Other panel members, any disclosures of interest? All right, none to disclose today. Thank you. So we'll move ahead then and take the presentation from Mr. Mark Halsall. And in accordance with the DAP standing orders, I've just allowed you 3 minutes for your presentation. So please focus on the main aspects when you present. We have all received your written documentation and have absorbed that. After your presentation, I'll invite panel members to ask you questions. And after we've dealt with that, then we'll go to the officers for any comments they may have and any questions that panel members may have of them. So I'll remind you, Mr. Halsall, when you get to your 3-minute mark and encourage you to wrap up if you still have further things to add. So when you're ready, please start. You're on mute, Mark, at the moment.
Thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity to speak to the DAP regarding this item. We've requested 3 changes to the approval, and effectively it's one change that the report doesn't recommend to be supported. These are obviously the old plan that was attached to the approval, the fact that cellar door sales can already operate, and the licensed restaurant restriction is being that the rest of the agriculture needs to be in place before it occurs. And that's the only point that we seem to have a difference on. obviously it's important to recognise that the previous approval permitted these uses to occur based on how we've requested it. The report indicates that there's a relationship between the amount of intensive agriculture and the establishment of a licensed restaurant, and makes reference to certain clauses in the scheme, including particularly clause 4.2.2.1G, which is an objective of the zone, advising that sustainable low impact tourist development such as chalet development should only be established when there's continued agricultural activity and/or protection of vegetation. And this clause is specifically dealing with tourist development, which is generally unrelated to agriculture. That's why it's referencing such as chalets. A licensed restaurant isn't necessarily a tourist use under it isn't a tourist use under the scheme. Just because Margaret is a tourism destination doesn't necessarily mean that it's a tourist use. And the scheme has specific provisions that deal with it differently, restaurants, because obviously there's a relationship to agriculture that's been inherent in the establishment of agricultural enterprises and then showcasing of their food and wine through restaurants. And that's exemplified by clause 4.16.4, which simply recognises that agricultural pursuits need to be the primary use. And in this case, that will be the case, because we've got intensive agriculture and water supplies established. We've got a winery, brewery and distillery approved and to be constructed, and also sales, and all of those things are legitimate agricultural pursuits. And the restaurant is secondary to that. On top of that, it's important to note that the brewery use includes consumption on site. And so obviously part of the restaurant function will be in conjunction with brewery use, and that is consumption in association with that production. The report also makes reference to comply with low impact tourist development, again referencing clause 4.2.2.1 and 4.16.3 of the scheme also makes reference to this. And this is where it's talking about chalets, cabins, caravan parks and guest houses, again reiterating that the reference of compliance with low impact tourist development is something that's relevant to tourist accommodation and not necessarily licensed restaurants. So the owner is committed to planting the rest of the agriculture within 5 years of the establishment of a licensed restaurant, and that's why we've requested the condition in the way that we've asked in our presentation. We consider that the intent of the scheme is not to ensure that licensed restaurants have some direct relationship to the amount of agricultural planting. It's simply necessary to demonstrate that they're incidental to agricultural pursuits and not a primary use, which is the case with this proposal, particularly given the commitment to plant further agriculture thereafter. So I'm here with, as I said, with Nick Morris. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much for sticking to your allotted time frame. I may start first of all and see if Councillor Boland had any questions of the presenter.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Binks, did you have any questions?
Not at this stage, no, thank you.
Thank you. Other panel members, any questions of the presenter? Thank you.
You're saying that you want to have approval to the restaurant and the agricultural plantings, etc., within 5 years of the commencement of operation of the restaurant?
That's correct. The current approval requires the balance of the agriculture to be put in place within 5 years of the establishment of the restaurant.
What happens if you don't? Can the council come in and close it down? You run the risk of that.
That's true. I mean, obviously, it's questionable that that there's a need to plant the rest of the agriculture under the scheme, but obviously that's the basis on which we lodged the application, and obviously we're requesting modifications to the approval. But yeah, that's a fair comment.
Okay, thank you.
So,
just to confirm, your current approval that you got a few months ago, that is consistent with your current request, isn't it?
No, what it does is it disallows the immediate establishment of the cellar door, which what we've got to remember is there's a previous planning approval that we've operated on, and therefore that's still current, and we can establish the cellar door immediately. And we are required to establish the balance of the intensive agriculture within 5 years of the establishment of the restaurant. This recommendation says that we have to plant all of the agriculture immediately before we can get the restaurant underway. The Shire have actually agreed in their report to we can undertake the cellar door immediately, and they have agreed to the plan being rectified. There was an older plan attached to the report.
Karen Hyde speaking. What do you need to do in order to plant and irrigate the remainder of the land shown on the plan for agricultural purposes?
There's an additional 5 hectares of viticulture and 0.4 hectares of apples shown on the plans. The landowner has obviously established all of the water supplies and has infrastructure in place, and so it would just be a natural extension of those and the obviously acquisition of those plantings and installation of those.
And the relationship of that additional planting and the restaurant?
Well, there's viticulture and apples, which relates to production of wine and cider, and so obviously that relates to the produce that's grown, that's produced through the premises, and then obviously sold with a meal through the public consumption of the brewery, and also with a meal through the licensed restaurant use.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the time frame, 5 years, what happens within those 5 years? Why is it that those additional areas of agriculture would prove difficult to open in the short term?
Well, the landowner's already commenced construction of the building, and it was only through the request for additional seats that the Shire changed their recommendations in respect of establishing all of the agriculture. And so obviously the proponent wants to get the land use going, and that'll assist in furthering the agricultural pursuits on the property and widening production as well.
I'm trying to understand the 5-year period. We've got a bit of feedback.
The 5-year period comes from the original condition of the Shire.
Okay.
The original condition of the Shire was all agreed initially that the balance of the agriculture should be in place once the licensed restaurant is issued with a building permit, and we agreed to that at the beginning, and we've followed through that still to this point.
May I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the agriculture that we've already got in is enough to supply the restaurant and winery. We've already got the 5 hectares of mixed orchard, which all that fruit and food will be used in the restaurant and the brewery. And we also have 3 lots of close planted vineyard that's been established. So we've already got enough to supply the business as what we want to do. And this request of the next lot, which we will, as we want to do, we want to establish it anyway, but that's something that they're holding us to put in this amount in 5 years. So that's sort of our question is, do we not already have enough, and can I naturally move forward with planting what we want to plant as we go? Or, and I'm also happy, if it's the only way to go ahead, is to agree to the 5-year term to have that agriculture by that timeline.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Simon, other question?
Yes, please. Look, I'm just looking at the plan that you've got, which shows your existing plantings. What do you propose? The next phase of agriculture, the bit that we're talking about, is that just the bit in the lower southwest corner, the proposed apple orchard, 0.4 hectares?
So that's one part of it, and that's on the, I suppose you call that the zoom-in plan for the western part of the site. Yeah. And then the other site plan, which is plan number 2, in the east, on the right-hand side of that, you'll see that there's another 5 hectares of viticulture that hasn't gone in just yet as well.
I see. Okay. So we're talking about 5 hectares, are we?
Basically that 5 hectares and the 0.4 hectares of apple orchard as well.
And what's your actual time frame going to be? I mean, if you get a 5-year limit here, how long do you actually think it's going to take?
Well, I would say, if that's what the condition that stays in place, once we get the business up and running, we'll start putting it in. But this process has taken such a long time, and it's been so costly. I've put in agriculture as it stands already, and now if we're held to that, I have to put in, irrigation lines, all the trellising for the vineyard, buy the propagated cuttings. All that is money that I have to spend before I even start a business to, getting cash back. And that's going to make it tough. But once we get the wheels turning, as we've always said, we plan on doing probably more than this 5 hectares over the course of the life of the business.
Councillor Binks, question? Did you have a question?
I did, but Mr. Symes has asked that question.
Any other questions from panel members of the applicant?
I do actually have one.
All right, Councillor Binks does have one, and then I'll refer to Councillor Boland. Thank you.
Thank you. It's David Binks. A question through to the proponent. If the officer's recommendation stands as per the RAR that we have, and you are required to plant and irrigate those the additional 5 hectares, the apple orchard and the vineyard. If what I'm hearing you say is correct, are you saying that you will not open the restaurant?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to. What reality is that I won't be able to plant anything now till next spring. So that's months and months away. And then we have to make sure it's all established. Obviously, it's more money. It puts more strain on the outcome of the business. But yeah, we'll still definitely move ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boland, you had a question?
Yes, my question is around the time frame. Like this, there was an approval back in 2017, and we're 8 years on from there. Wouldn't you have thought that your plantings would have been finished by now?
No, because the rule was once we have the restaurant, 5 years from that time frame, and then we had all the other things that came into place, COVID, the lights, and also we weren't happy with the seating. After having, we dealt with consultants, and they looked at it and said, look, for a venue like this, and we also looked at what was in the region with, comparable businesses, and it just didn't seem to match up. And so that's why we held off, and then we went through this process, which is, it's taken quite some time. And the reason we didn't and haven't done it is because it was from the time that we established the restaurant. So we weren't going to go just spend more money prior to having a business running.
Nothing further from me, thanks.
Thank you. Further question from Councillor Binks?
Yeah, thank you. Again, through to the proponent. Where does the water supply come from for the additional 5 hectares?
So we've got a water source up the back where the 5 hectares of orchard is. And the table water, at the moment, we've got a soak up there, which irrigates the 5 hectares of orchard. And we run it all summer or last summer, and it never goes below a certain level. On the establishment of the next lot, we may put a request in to build a more substantial size dam. But as it stands now, we can draw from that, and we can also, we've got 2 dams down at near the brewery venue and restaurant venue itself. One of those dams we don't draw off at all at the moment, but we have the capacity to draw off that as well.
And with respect to the area that is proposed for planting and irrigation, do you have all the approvals in place to draw the water in order to irrigate those?
Yeah, as it stands, the water that we have now, yeah, that's all approved.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
One last question.
Mr. Syme has a further question.
Just one last question. I'm just trying to add up what you currently have there. It looks to me as if you've got about 5 hectares of permaculture off to the east, and then around the main buildings you've got about another most of a hectare of planting. So you've got about 6 hectares in place already. Is that roughly right?
That's correct, and also remembering that the vineyards are close planted, so I'm not sure.
It's pretty much double what you'd have in a normal vineyard for the same spacing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if we're all done with questions of the applicant, we will refer to the officers at the Shire. We have Lucy Gowes and Matt Cuthbert. Lucy, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if not. We wondered, did you have any comments you wanted to make up front? Are you happy to just take questions?
What we could simply say is that you'll recall that we didn't support the application when it was considered in October, and our assumption is that the DAP chose to impose the condition that we're talking about now, being condition 5, as a way of, in part, addressing the Shire's concerns, which was around the extent to which those non-rural uses were ancillary to agriculture. And so we say that, nothing's changed in terms of our concerns about that issue, and therefore we're requesting the condition be retained.
All right, thank you, Matt. I'll invite panel members if they have any questions of you. Councillor Boland, do you have questions?
Yes, just a few questions, maybe just fairly technical ones. Just in the report, on the first page of that, it isn't numbered, but it's page 5 in the agenda. There's a reference to value of amendment 2.25 million, but I think that was the value of the original proposal. So maybe this form doesn't allow for what would be the value of an amendment, but maybe there's no difference really here anyway. So just something I noticed. I've got a couple of others, but
yes. And your
yes,
your assumption's correct there, Councillor.
Yes. Also in that same area in the report, it's got the date of the original DAP decision, 14 January 2025, but I think our decision was 15 October 24. So is that a typo of some sort?
Yes, you're correct. The 14th of the 1st this year was the date which the applicant lodged this request to amend.
All right, thanks. To the chair, do we need to make any amendment on that?
I don't think we need to make an amendment to the table per se before the no, we don't have that. What happens, councillor, is that the recommendation where it talks about responsible authority recommendation or the DAP's recommendation, that's what goes into the letter of approval, or the letter confirming the outcome of the meeting. But the panel, the table before that, you're right to point out there's some inconsistencies or inaccuracies there, but that doesn't substantively form part of any decision today. But thank you for being so across all the detail. Much appreciated.
Well, I think we've got a problem with what's coming before us today, that there's been some wrong plans attached. So I was just trying to get things in sync. Something probably maybe a little bit similar is on page 2 of the report, page 7 on the agenda. It says the adjustments sought include the following, and so there's two things mentioned there, which I think are the two things that we're dealing with essentially. But it was just the word include the following. It sounded like there may be more, but I'm assuming there aren't any more. But that might be a question for it's a question, I guess, for the Shire staff, that there aren't other amendments.
Yes, sure. Would you like to comment on that, Matt or Lucy?
Sure. Yes, that's the sum total of all the amendments that are being sought.
Good. Thank you. That clears that up. That was all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you to panel members in the room. Did you have questions of the Shire officers? Thank you, Councillor Binks.
Thank you, David Binks. Hello, Matt. Hello, Lucy. I have a question for you regarding LPS 1 versus LPS 2. The first question I have is, how does LPS 2, which is the draft planning scheme, how does that reflect the provisions of LPS 1 in this regard?
So first, just to let you know that the draft scheme is currently with the Planning Commission for its final check before being presented to the Minister. So that's where it is in the process. You'll recall that when this came before the DAP in October, we set out how the provisions of the draft scheme interact with this issue. But in summary, you could say that the provisions are fairly consistent with the current scheme, although they are deliberately have been modified slightly to reinforce the idea that non-rural uses need to be ancillary to rural uses in the agricultural zone.
So understanding what you've said, just a clarification, sorry. The planning scheme that's currently before the WAPC, the intent of that is to strengthen the provisions that were in the current scheme, which is LPS 1?
Yes,
that's right.
Right, thank you. That's fine, that's all I needed.
All right, thank you. Other questions from panel members in the room? Mr. Syme, do you have any questions of officers? Mr. Goltas?
Even if they were to have planted all of these rural uses, would they then be able to get the restaurant? Is it still determined that it's ancillary?
Yeah, so I feel like from our perspective, that idea that it be ancillary has passed us by. We made our arguments last time and you issued your approval. But as I say, our assumption is that you impose this condition to address in part the degree to which the non-rural uses could be said to be ancillary to agriculture by increasing the extent of agriculture that will be undertaken on this site.
So if part of the land is used for grazing, is that agriculture?
Yes.
So if they came back and said, well, a quick way of establishing these a rural use, and this to be ancillary, to turn the whole lot for cattle grazing, would that be?
You'll recall that we spent quite some time picking apart what ancillary actually means in our previous report. And one of the components of that was, as we saw it, that the agriculture has some functional relationship with the non-rural uses. And the applicant reinforced that concept in their presentation to you by saying, look, we're going to grow all these things, we're going to produce all this wine, and then we're going to showcase it and sell it through our outlets. And so the answer to your question would be dependent on whether or not the restaurant was taking that produce and using it in the restaurant.
Don't want to take it to the extreme, but they could use the milk from the cows and use the meat from the cows and serve it in the restaurant.
And there are indeed restaurants, very successful restaurants, paddock to plate, restaurants in our Shire and rural areas that do that to very successfully.
All right. No further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to follow up on some of the things that Councillor Boland had raised, you're now comfortable that we've got the right plans attached to the agenda and that the condition refers to them correctly at this point?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Just to be sure. I don't think I've got any further questions. Mr. Coltas has got one more.
Yeah, just going back, I mean, if the restaurant was approved and they change, sorry, the restaurant has been approved, but what I'm saying is if the proponent got the approval and came back next week and said, well, I'm going to run some cattle, I'm going to do some vegetables and paddock to plate, I suppose that would not be in accordance with the planning approval, wouldn't it? Or would it be in?
That's right. So the approval that you have issued requires the planting of vines. So if they came to us and said, we'd like to graze animals instead, we'd say, well, that's inconsistent with the approval that you've got from the DAP.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right. Did anybody wish to refer back to the applicant at this point before we move ahead with the item? Did you have any follow-ups, Jean?
No.
No, all good. All right. Thank you all for responding to our questions. We will move ahead to the item. We will take.
Oh, sorry. Just back to the council.
Sorry, Mr. Coltas has one more question for Shire officers.
So just enforcing the condition. I mean, if they started the restaurant without all the plantings, that would be in contravention, obviously, of their approval. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So we will take this item in the order that the RAR is presented. And we have the responsible authority recommendation, which appears on page 5 of our agenda, to, in the first instance, accept this as a Form 2, and secondly, then to approve the application with all the nominated plans, and further to amend 2 conditions, condition 2 and condition 5. So first, please, could I have a mover for that as the primary motion for the purpose of discussion? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Binks moves. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Boland is happy to second. Councillor Binks, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Chair. The conditions that were placed on this item when it was originally considered were placed or were recommended and included by this panel, and they were to support the concerns that the Shire had around the incidental use of the land being predominantly agriculture. That is consistent with the town planning scheme, which exists for a reason, and I think that it's something that we must give due regard to and respect, of course. By not planting, the proposal fails to satisfy the LPS 1. As we've heard, there is a draft version before the WAPC, which is not what we're really considering. However, what is of interest to me is that Shire staff have indicated that they are keen to reinforce this notion that the development needs to be incidental to the use of agriculture. So it's not being watered down in our thinking at all. If anything, we're saying this is more and more important. The town planning scheme is something obviously that goes through an extensive process and reflects the will of the community and good planning. And I think is something that is important for us to pay attention to. I would also mention that on page 5, it's noted that the previous determination and subsequent SAT review of the original application, it was determined in order for the rural land use to be the predominant, the entirety of the agriculture would need to be implemented prior to the commencement of the restaurant. So, of course, you know, I respect the views of the tribunal, and they too feel that we need to be respecting the importance of having the development being incidental or not predominant to the use of the land that we have there. The applicant has said that the restaurant will still proceed should the officer's recommendation be supported by the panel. It will just take longer. So in my mind, we can preserve the integrity of the planning scheme and the conditions of that have been placed upon this application by this panel. The restaurant will still go ahead. It's just going to take a bit longer. So I haven't seen any, or I haven't heard any compelling suggestions or received any compelling information from the proponent to suggest that we now need to flip that, put the cart before the horse, get the restaurant going, and then let's have a look at what happens as far as the scheme is concerned. So for that reason, I find the officer's recommendation is to be sound. And Madam Chair, the reasons that I mentioned on page 6 for the officer's recommendation, I'm in full agreement with, and I would ask the other members to consider this motion in that respect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Binks. Councillor Boland, as a seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. We just have a couple of administrative matters there initially, and no difficulty with those about getting the correct plans. This coming forward as a part 2 application, but yeah, the crux of the matter is the agricultural aspects of the project, and they are not as great as they need to be, because what we have really, if say the restaurant, it becomes it's becoming a dominant part of the project rather than incidental, and so to be compliant with the scheme, then there needs to be more agriculture relative to the other aspects. There's been a considerable period of time involved with this project, the original application going back to 2017. And to go with the applicant's proposal would be delaying things even further. So I think the proposal by the administration of the Shire in the report is reasonable, and it's basically compliant with the scheme and what the scheme is attempting to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers for or against the motion? Mr. Syme.
Yes, look, on with the, I understand the position of the Shire and the Shire officers, and I understand the importance of looking at the town planning scheme as it is and as it may be amended. But I must say in this case, I'm with the applicant. The purpose really of this general planning approval process is to do two things in my view. First of all is to protect the community and the community from any disadvantage that may happen from a project. But it is also to allow a project to reasonably proceed, and the purpose is not to step in the way of what a reasonable use of a land by a landholder should be, and I don't think there's any argument which support that anything otherwise. In this case, is the interest of the community protected if we were to go with the applicant? And my view is it is, because we've got a position where if the restaurant is incorporated and we have an approval for the restaurant, good or ill, we have an approval for the restaurant, we have an approval for the winery, brewery, all of those things are in place. We are talking about time frame now. If for whatever reason the applicant does not put in place all of the extra 5 hectares or so of agriculture that is promised within 5 years, the restaurant needs to cease. There is a position where if in the long term, that is in the 4 or 5 year term, the reasonable expectations of the council are not met, then there is a remedy for that which is available. So I think that the interests of the community are met. I don't think it's useful for anybody for us to not to slavishly follow the written word without looking at the particular facts of a particular circumstances of a particular application. And in this case, I think the particular application and the facts of the history of it and the intentions and the momentum which has been built up now lead me to think that it's reasonable for us to apply the sort of discretion that would be expected to apply in this case. That's not to say it forms a precedent for anything else, because I think we're looking at the facts of the matter of this particular project, and I think for those reasons I'd be with the applicant, not with the Shire.
Did you wish to say anything more? Did you wish to make any amendments?
Yes, therefore, well, I can do it as an amendment or as an, okay. Well, I therefore move that modification of condition 5 is as suggested by the applicant, that is to take out the words prior to maps of the rule, land sales and so on, up to and including winery brewery, and replace it with within 5 years of establishment of the licensed restaurant, the balance of the agriculture shown on Plan P2 and P3 shall be implemented.
Thank you. That's an amending motion 1 moved by Mr. Syme to modify the wording of amended condition 5. Do I have a seconder?
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Matter of order.
Yes.
I do not believe that amendment can negate the original motion or any part of it. So I'm just wondering whether Mr. Syme is better to foreshadow this as an alternate motion.
We can do it that way if it's the preference of the panel. If you prefer to see a clean approach to the motion on the table and then seek an alternative.
Yes, that would be my preference.
As we
Up
wish.
to you, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's how the panel want to decide on what it's cleaner to.
All right. Well, we have that foreshadowed. We can come back to that. Let's see how we go with the rest of the panel's discussion.
I'm happy.
Thank you. Thank you for your point of order. Other speakers, Mr. Coltas.
Yes, look, on balance, I tend to agree with Mr. Syme. This application has been in the process for a long time. The proponent has shown that they are implementing the project. They've undertaken quite a bit of work there. And I think the intent of establishing a a mixed faceted undertaking with plantings, with orchard, a brewery, winery, brewery, winery, cellar door sales, and the restaurant with associated parking, etc., is established. I can understand the council's concern regarding the issue of predominant use, and I think that this in itself, this application in itself, could not be seen as creating a precedent, because this application has got its own specific attributes. I think the applicants, in order for them to fast track the 5-year establishment of the agriculture, there is a way out for them, and that is to perhaps come through with an amended application later on for some paddock to plate, and as an interim measure, but that's up to them if they wish to fast track this. The planning legislation in terms of penalties are quite severe these days, and should the proponents and the application or the approval runs with the land, so if the current proponent on sells or is unable to hang on to the property for various reasons, then the next person that takes over will be compelled to act with the approval as well. So I think the Shire has got quite an enforceable position in regard to the establishment of the restaurant and the agriculture within 5 years of that establishment. So therefore, I am supporting the alternate recommendation, or the requested change, modification to condition 5, and I'd like to see the outcome of our voting on that.
All right, thank you. Speaking to this particular motion, I'm comfortable with it being a Form 2, and accept the reasons that it's come forward is to make sure we have the right plans, to make sure that we acknowledge that the cellar door can function. The discussion around the commencement of the licensed restaurant, the fundamental built form and purpose and land use approved, but it's a question around when that can commence, and the notion of that being put on hold until the remainder of the agriculture, whatever that should be, is substantially in place and irrigated. I have some issues with, having heard from the applicant and equally understanding the Shire's position and the way that the scheme is written. Obviously, the fundamental objective of the scheme and Scheme 1 and foreshadowed Scheme 2 is to ensure the primacy of agriculture in this area, and to ensure that other uses, whether they be for tourism uses, which are classified separately in the scheme, to licensed premises, are incidental and not the main function of any particular area. The last application, we heard extensively from the applicant and drew on other comparisons around the intensive nature of this. So it's not just a sheer matter of hectareage, it's a matter of the actual function and the intensity of that agricultural purpose. And I was swayed by that, felt that that level of intensity of what was currently planted was sufficient to warrant approval to the additional capacity. I think what we're talking about here is really one of timing. I think the way that the amended condition is presented by the Shire could be regarded as could be regarded as unreasonable at this point. Withholding approval to commence a business for at least or potentially another 5 years, and requiring significantly more investment on behalf of the proponent. I think what would be reasonable would be to, and would still remain the proportionality and the primacy of the agricultural purpose, is to enable that additional planting to occur over a period of time and to set that time limit to give that certainty of 5 years, simply to allow for soil preparation, establishment and other matters which I presume are required for intensive agriculture. So I wouldn't see that alternate really significantly changing the previous application or the seeing it substantially the same as what's already approved, other than giving some certainty around time frame. Obviously, it would be in that alternate wording a desire to see all of the agriculture as presented on the plans before us implemented within a time frame. In that regard, then I would see that the restaurant would still remain subordinate to the overall primary use for agricultural purpose. So on that basis, I don't find myself in a position to wholeheartedly support the motion before us, and would be mindful to support the applicant's wording should the panel wish to bring that forward as an alternate. That being said, I return back to Councillor Binks as the mover to finalise the debate on this particular motion before us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate your comments, and Mr. Symes and Eugene as well. Thank you. Certainly given something to think about. I do have a question of process for you before I exercise my right to reply. At this point in debate, am I able to propose an amendment?
Can in your closing, yes, because you have the right to speak second, to have a second.
All right, if you're comfortable with that.
Yes.
I will reply to a couple of the points that have been made. Firstly, the proponent clearly stated that the restaurant will still proceed. So we are not saying to them, you cannot have the restaurant. The Shire staff are saying to them, we just need to observe what has been specified in the planning scheme and follow the correct order. As was mentioned, the intent of the scheme is to protect the community and to allow for orderly planning. I am concerned that by introducing that we are introducing a variable that creates some uncertainty, in fact, for the community, and some uncertainty in the planning process, and that uncertainty has been mentioned before. If the planting doesn't go ahead in 5 years, then what? So we're introducing something that we don't have an answer for. And to my way of thinking, my view is that that is not protecting the community, but it's creating a scenario in which we're just not 100% sure. We're not sure what the outcome is likely to be. The purpose of the scheme is clear. The intent of the provisions are clear. And members, I would say that the developer or the proponent is also clear that the restaurant will go ahead. So I am inclined to retain the motion that I'd moved originally. I would like to, however, propose a minor amendment to that, which I'm hoping will help to reduce any uncertainty that's in there. And that amendment would be amending point 5, and that is that the planting and irrigation commence immediately and be completed within 5 years. And under those circumstances, the restaurant continues.
So were you going to, just so that we're clear before I seek a
Yes,
seconder, I'd just like to be clear on the actual wording. So what would amended condition 5 now read as in its complete form?
We would need to state that on.
Are you seeking to delete prior to commencement of the licensed restaurant? Are you basically beginning condition 5 with a capital T for the applicant must have planted and irrigated all agriculture on approved plans P2 and 3, complete construction of the winery brewery? I just want to be clear on what your wording is, councillor, sorry.
Yes, I understand, and I thank you for that. Madam Chair, what I'm trying to suggest is that we begin the process of planting and irrigating on approval, and that at the same time the applicant can begin to develop the restaurant. So to have those two things happening concurrently. Perhaps I should seek advice from staff as to what would be an appropriate way to word this.
Discretion, I'm happy to refer to the Shire staff. You will have understood what Councillor Binks is seeking to do. I think he has explained that he wishes to enable the restaurant to commence, but to ensure some certainty around planting and irrigation also commencing in the same time frame rather than that being delayed. But he would like to refer to you for some appropriate wording to assist him, please, with his amending motion.
Is the current condition that we've got, Councillor Binks, can you just explain exactly how you would want that to be slightly different? I'm not 100% clear.
I'm working on the officer's recommendation.
The one that's on the table.
The one that's on the table.
So Lucy, at the moment, the condition we're talking about is the one that is the primary recommendation, right, commencement of the licensed restaurant, etc., etc.
But the wording of that already asks for it. I'm just not 100% sure what Councillor Binks wants to do with the wording of that to get some certainty that's not already there in what we've recommended.
You want them to commence immediately and finished within 5 years.
I think that's a good point. Yes, that's what we want. Yeah,
So
it might just be.
perhaps we say that this is not suggest and we say plantings must have commenced planting and irrigation of all agriculture.
Yeah.
And such and winery, brewery, and the the balance of the agriculture shown in plans 2 and 3 shall be completed to be implemented within 5 years.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Madam Chair.
Is that what you're after?
That's exactly right.
Councillor Binks, would you like to run that past the officers?
Yeah, it's through. Thank you for your assistance too. I appreciate that. Through to the Shire staff, just your advice on an amendment to condition 5 of the officer's recommendation, which would read, prior to the commencement of the licensed restaurant, the applicant must have commenced planting and irrigation of all agriculture shown on the approved plans 2 and P3, which shall be implemented within 5 years, and completed construction of the winery and brewery.
So you just added commenced there.
What does commenced mean? They've planted 1 vine, 1 hectare.
It means, yeah, it means all agriculture shown on the approved plans.
I'm just wondering what commenced looks like as opposed to implemented. That would be my point.
Matt, do you have alternate wording that would give you, as the assessing authority, some comfort or certainty?
Our concern's not what happens at the start, it's what's done.
We've lost you. So can I please propose a procedural motion, standing orders, to enable us to have a broader discussion on this, please? I'd like to move that. Seconded, Councillor Binks. Those in favour? Thank you very much. We suspend standing orders at 10:33. It's becoming a little bit more complicated than we had.
Does that mean
We'll
it's
just
not?
try and get the Shire back as well.
Does that mean it's not live streamed anymore?
No, it's still going.
Okay. Just checking.
No dad jokes.
Just gives us an opportunity to have a fuller discussion.
Perhaps I could suggest the wording is exactly what we're doing. Approval is granted to the licensed restaurant be implemented and to meet the objectives and development standards of the priority agriculture zone. The planting and irrigation of all agriculture shown on the approved plans shall be completed in 5 years.
Which is pretty much what we've got.
Yeah, but it's saying the approval is granted to the licensed restaurant.
Yeah.
You got to do everything else within 5 years.
That's what the alternate does say, basically.
Yes.
Because it doesn't take away the current approval that's been granted for the
Restaurant.
Commencement's a tricky concept.
Yeah, I understand.
Substantial commencement.
Even substantial commencement, it's a tricky
I
concept.
think that the
5
Shire
years.
are concerned about what that. Can I don't know that this helps in any way, but I also wondered whether it would be possible to introduce a level of staging. So previously, when the applicant came to us, they had an approval for 80 spaces, 80 patrons. This group turned that into 200. Essentially, what we're discussing is the number between 81 and 200 to ensure that there is some proportionality in terms of those additional agricultural areas being implemented. I wonder if we enable the restaurant for seating up to 80 patrons immediately, and then beyond 80. The remainder of the agriculture should be planted.
I think that's the reason they went. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, the investment in setting up a restaurant for 80
versus the 200.
versus the 200 is quite substantial. That's the reason they went for the 200.
We've got the Shire back. Thank you. Sorry, Lucy and Matt, we've suspended standing orders to enable us to have a bit more of a freer discussion, inclusive of yourselves, as authors of the RAR. We're still trying to grapple with, Matt, we lost you at the point of, what is commencement? Did you, in the intervening blackness, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just to say that just because of, for ease of implementation or ease of checking compliance, the way we tend to do things is not has something started, it's has something been completed. And that's why we prefer that kind of language. It's purely to do with how easy it is to check something has been done.
I don't think there's a middle ground. I think either allow them to commence the licensed restaurant now. Argument I'm implying, I infer that this is sort of cross subsidising.
We shouldn't be debating at this point, really. No, this is just a.
Yeah. I don't think there's a middle ground.
Councillor Boland, did you have any further questions of the officers or anything to add?
Just one point. Prior to commencement of the licensed restaurant, I assume that's referring to commencement of operation of the licensed restaurant, as opposed to, say, commencement of the building of the licensed restaurant. So would it be operational? Is that what we're referring to there?
Yes, I'd say
so. I'll just confer with my colleague.
No, it's prior to construction.
Lucy's confirming it's prior to construction. I mean, that's
okay.
That's in our interpretation.
Right. Maybe we need to clarify that, because that brings forward the time at which planting would have to commence if it was going to be, as per what Councillor Binks is suggesting, that there's a commencement aspect for the plantings, and I'm somewhat inclined to that to give some impetus to there being commencement of the plantings. And I suppose you could go for something along the lines of substantial commencement, but then there's that question about what is substantial commencement.
Certainly, and look, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with the suggestion that Councillor Binks is making. It's just that at some point, somewhere down the line, us, is going to need to make a judgment call about whether something has been substantially commenced. And look, that's a problem that we face every day. So again, I'm not saying there's there's something inherently wrong with it. It's certain we've provided our input, but it's an option that you could certainly go with.
Madam Chair, I am comfortable in the direction that
Okay.
I'm.
Are you happy to resume the meeting now?
So I'd like to suggest if the members are happy to.
Are we all happy to resume standing orders at this point? Are we comfortable?
Should we clarify that point? Maybe clarify those 2 points about the commencement of the is it the building of the licensed restaurant? Should we incorporate that in there to make it clearer? That's probably a relatively easy one, but the other one about the substantial commencement of planting is more difficult. There's some difference of opinion around that, I'm thinking, but
Madam Chair.
Yes, please, Councillor Binks. So your wording is?
I actually will withdraw my.
Oh, well, let's get back into the meeting then. Let's get back into the meeting. I propose. Yes, I propose we resume standing orders. Seconded, Councillor Binks. Those in favour, that was unanimous. Thank you. Resume the meeting at 10:40.
Thank you,
the floor is back with you, Councillor Binks.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and I formally withdraw my proposed amendment there. I think we need to keep things as simple and clean as possible and not confuse things. So I appreciate all of the input that has been given. Thank you to staff as well for that. It highlights to me the importance of following the process. The comments that have been made by the other members, whilst they're all valid, I think they will introduce variables and uncertainties. So I will ask for members to consider their positions with respect to the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Debate is closed. Let's put this motion to the vote. It's a motion of the responsible authority report unaltered at this point. Those in favour?
Sorry, no problem.
So your hand's just off the corner there, Councillor Boland. That's two for the motion. And those against the motion? That's 3 members against the motion. The motion is lost, 2 to 3. I will then therefore call for an alternate motion, please. Is there a mover for an alternate? Mr. Syme, yes.
Yes, I'd like to move similar to what the proposal of the applicant is. Condition 2 update plans to include P2 to P12, the Shire 30th of May, and modification of condition 5 to within 5 years of the operations of the licensed restaurant, the balance of agriculture shown in plans 2 and 3 shall be implemented.
And that includes the preamble, Mr. Syme.
Yes, including the preamble.
To accept this as a Form 2 and the approved plan. So it's thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please? Mr. Coltaz. Mr. Syme, would you like to speak to the alternate?
Yeah, look, agriculture is a pretty tough business, and it requires, particularly the way that this is being done, a fair bit of capital investment. And if we've got an incidental use, which we've decided is incidental, of a restaurant and brewery, which in a sense is cross-subsidising the capital investment in that agriculture, and the agriculture itself is feeding the restaurant, it's a complicated equation. It requires a fair bit of capital, and I think we need to give that the time to be able to play out in a planning and economic sense, and I think this would do that. And that's why I'd said before, we are then looking at the particular circumstances of this application, which is not a normal one that the Shire would have, and look at the particulars of the application and allow ourselves to apply some sort of flexibility to that, which I think we need to do to be sensible. So I think that this will do that. I think the wording, just as we go past that, the wording of establishment is one which is open for question. Therefore, I think it's the operations of the licensed restaurant. So for the reasons I've previously stated, and for those reasons, I think that this would be a reasonable outcome for both certainly for the applicant, but it's also a reasonable outcome for the community, for the Shire, because it does still maintain that ability, and a very clear ability, to ensure that the safeguards are still there. That is, if that agriculture is not implemented, and this is something which I think the Shire officers will be able to very clearly judge, then the licensed restaurant doesn't commence operations. It's a simple equation.
Thank you, Mr. Syme. Mr. Coltaz, a seconder.
Yes, look, I endorse the comments of Mr. Syme. I think the integrity of the scheme is maintained. I think the intent to have the licensed restaurant and the planting within 5 years of commencement of operation is valid. I think we've got discretion to do that. in effect, it gives them a bit longer than 5 years from the commencement of operation, because they've got to get building license and a number of other things. So if it's not done, then the proponent can't say, well, we didn't have enough time. And there are penalties involved in the compliance sections of the scheme and the Planning and Development Act. So I think that on balance, it's a good outcome for the proponent and also the Shire, and it allows the proponent the ability to, as Mr. Simon said, cross-subsidise the operation, which a lot of these mixed faceted agricultural pursuits do have to have in terms of agriculture and chalets and so forth, because agriculture on its own, on the scale of a lot of the undertakings, not just within Augusta Margaret River Shire, but a lot of others, it does require support from other non-agricultural uses. So I'm supporting this application.
Thank you. Other speakers for or against? Councillor Binks, did you wish to speak on this motion?
Could I have clarification of the motion or the wording?
My understanding is that it is begins as per the previous one, so it's an acceptance of this as a Form 2. That be item number 1. 2 is consistent with that, and then the amended conditions are to deal with the approval and the plans and specifications, P2, P12, and then the amended condition 5 really talks to the establishment of operations, and then follows through the applicant must have planted and irrigated all agriculture shown on P2 and P3 and completed construction of work.
Sorry, just going on, just the exact wording of number 5 is?
Prior to
Was it upon
commencement of operation, establishment of operations, wasn't it? You said a commencement of operations, John?
upon the commencement of operation of the licensed restaurant?
Yes.
5 years of the commencement of operations of the licensed restaurant, the balance of the agriculture.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I will speak to this. I just wonder if we need to, because we had some issues with the word commenced, and I'm wondering if we have the same with the implemented. I'm going to suggest an amendment to the last word, and that is be completed.
So this is amending motion 1 of the alternate. Where do you want to put the?
So point 5, change the last word, which currently reads implemented, to completed.
Completed rather than implemented.
Yes.
Okay, I'll seek a seconder for that amending motion. Yeah, okay. All right, do you want to explain your reasons?
My reasons for that are, as Shire staff said, that they can take action on some defined marks, such as being completed, and that words like commenced and implemented might be a little bit shady.
Okay, thank you. John, did you wish to say?
No. It's just I think that's right. Implemented is a bit of a wobbly term, so completed is much.
Yeah. Mr. Coulter?
Can I just get the reading read out of the new part 5?
Yes. We're now saying, whilst the applicant's alternate was within 5 years of the establishment, but I think the mover and the seconder have said commencement of operations of the licensed restaurant. The balance of the agriculture shown on plans P2 and P3 shall be completed.
Okay, fine.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just supporting that.
Okay. Councillor Boland, did you wish to speak to the amending motion?
I'm okay with that part of it, but I still have some concern about commencement of plantings, because the way it stands at the moment, it could be probably another 4 or 5 years before anything happens.
Sorry, Councillor Boland, we don't have that wording in this particular condition.
No, and that's, well, I'd be seeking that we do have that, so that there is some incentive, or actually, no, sorry, some obligation to get plantings underway. And I think we're leaving it too open to lack of progress. So I'd be happy to move an amendment.
Well, I'll put this amendment to the vote, and then we'll come back to you on that. So back with you, Councillor Binks, as mover of this amending motion. Did you wish to say anything further?
Oh, no, there's nothing else to say.
All right, I'll put this amending motion to the vote. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Back with you. Did you still wish to say anything further about the motion on the table now?
No, I'm supportive of the motion that's on the table.
All right, thank you.
The one that's on the table
Is your alternative?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Boland, did you wish to speak to the motion that's on the table with that amendment in place, please?
Yes, as I've been saying, I think we're leaving it too open to this taking a considerable period of time into the future before substantial commencement happens. So I'd like to move an amendment at the appropriate point, which I'm not entirely clear about at the moment, that there shall be substantial commencement of the balance of the agriculture. So before commencement of the operation of the restaurant, which I think there's agreement that we're going to put that in the operation of the restaurant, but I'd like to see that there shall be substantial commencement of the balance of the agriculture before commencement of the operation of the restaurant.
Okay. So that is an amending motion to amendment 1, which would be to introduce the words "there shall be substantial commencement of the planting and irrigation."
that should be a
prior to.
new condition.
You're happy for that to be a new condition?
Yes, if that makes it easier to draft this, then yes, it might make it easier to debate it as well.
Councillor Boland, that's amending motion 2, and it's a new condition. There shall be substantial commencement of the planting and irrigation prior to, what were your words?
The words around the, which we already have, I think, around the commencement of the operation of the restaurant.
Okay.
Could I just clarify in terms of you were using planting and irrigation, and what I'm looking at the moment has the balance of the agriculture.
Okay.
So should we be consistent in using the same term?
There should be substantial commencement of the balance of the agriculture prior to commencement of the operations of the restaurant.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a seconder, please, for that as amending motion 2? There's no seconder, Councillor Boland, so I'm afraid that amending motion lapses. The floor
Yes.
is back with you, however, to speak to the motion on the table.
Yes. Oh, I still have those concerns around this project not progressing as it should to really be bringing about the substantial agriculture as opposed to the other uses which are going to be predominant. We didn't really hear great reasons previously from the applicant around why things hadn't progressed. There was reference to some to COVID and seeding problems, and that held off while they brought more applications. This is sort of the third bite of the cherry in a way. And I think there needs to be some progress, more substantial progress than what now is probably going to be 6 years off into the future. Well, at a guess, there's 5 years in the wording as we have it now, and it's probably another considerable period of time before a restaurant's going to be operational. So there's no incentive to there's no great incentive to get things done. That's my concern about the recommendation, the motion as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just briefly speak to the motion on the table. A lot has already been said. I'm comfortable that with the wording that we have, that this requires the further investment and implementation of the agricultural development to maintain its primacy and the proportionality between that and the non-agricultural uses, which I think is consistent with the intent of the scheme and protects the broad interests of the rural and agricultural priority area. I think it enables, with due reasonableness, the applicant to gather sufficient investment and to prepare for the rollout of the balance of the agriculture. I think there are a couple of fairly significant checks and balances in all of this, remembering that condition 2 requires that the development must comply with the approved plans at all times, unless otherwise approved in writing by the Shire or the Development Assessment Panel. And further, we have a time limit within condition 5 as amended now. So I believe that with both of those things, there is an onus upon the applicant to stay with the approvals and to develop within a timely manner as specified. So I'm comfortable to support the motion on the table. That being said, back to Mr. Simers, the mover, to close out.
Nothing further, thanks. I think it's all been said.
Very good. I'll put this to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as amended, that's 4 of us. Those against? Councillor Boland against the motion is carried 4-1. Thank you. I'll just refer briefly back to our agenda. We have no SAP reconsiderations for the Shire. As far as other business in Part D, there are SAT applications at the moment in the Shire of York, Shire of Dardanup, Town of Port Hedland and Shire of Capel. I thank everybody today as I moved to closing the meeting for their participation. I'm sorry about some of the technical difficulties we had through the meeting. But thank everybody for their persistence with signing in, particularly mention Councillor Boland, who is signing in from the other side of the world in a different time zone. Fantastic commitment, and thank you to Councillor Binks for travelling up here this morning to be with us, and close the meeting at 11 AM. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.